Hi everyone, I'm Zach Reinhardt, here to review the new Predawn record, Absence. Predawn is the alias of acoustic guitar wielding singer songwriter Shimizu Miwako. This is her third album, and over the years, she's made a name for herself for making very soft, stripped back, and intimate singer songwriter tracks, often with nothing but an acoustic guitar and her voice. Her voice is soft and high pitched and distinctly Japanese, but it's not quite as extreme as someone like Yakushimaru Etsuko from the band Sotaisei Riron. It's a nice kind of middle tone, and she's very calm and almost whispery when she sings. And on this album, she brings her typical acoustic singer songwriter self and mixes it with a bunch of band instrumentation from upright bass and drums to flutes and trumpets and pianos. She really kind of ups the production value on this album, and it works out really well. She still maintains a very kind of soft, somewhat somber, intimate atmosphere, with one exception that I'll get into later. Pretty much from front to back, and the album really works very well. The album kicks off with the song Skipping Ticks, which is a very by the books pre-dawn song, but you can already hear the little hints of extra instrumentation that are working their way inside, as this song in the background has some upright bass, it has some harmonica as well, and this kind of faint ringing that hangs in the air of the song and is just very soft and in the background. And aside from that, it's a fairly typical pre-dawn track. There's finger-picked acoustic guitar and a very pretty vocal melody sung very softly. And it's nothing super special, but it's a decent intro to the album. And the production value only grows from there with the next song, Black and White, which starts off as a pretty typical acoustic track, but halfway through really picks up with a full band and a trumpet solo of all things. There's some very pretty vocal harmonies on here as well, and again there's some harmonica, which sounds very nice. And my only complaint with this track is it sounds a little dated. And this is a problem that pops up a few times on the album, and it's just, I almost feel like I'm listening to like an old Ingrid Michaelson or maybe a Jack Johnson track or something. The songs just sound like they could have been played 10 years ago. And I just don't feel like that sound really works right now with more modern singer-songwriters like Sun Kill Moon and Joanna Newsom and Regina Spektor, I guess, is still doing stuff. She has a more modern sound. I feel like when you listen to this track and compare it to a lot of these more modern artists, it just feels like it's wearing its kind of older influences on its sleeve a bit too heavily. But the performances and the atmosphere and the songwriting of these tracks are of a high enough quality that I can really kind of overlook that and enjoy the tracks for how good they are. The next song was the single for this album. They put out a nice little animated music video for this song. It's called Universal Mind, and it's even bigger. It just keeps kind of growing. This song immediately kicks off with a full band, drums, bass, and electric guitar in addition to the acoustic guitar. And I really like this track a lot. It's got a very nice melody to it, and it's bigger and it's more upbeat in pace, but it's still somewhat somber, and it doesn't lose that intimacy that was built up in those first few tracks. There's a nice guitar solo on this thing. There's some like either recorders or flutes in the background that make like a slightly dissonant harmony. Like they're all just slightly off pitch where they should be. And it adds this kind of like clumsy charm to the song that I find really appealing. And I really find this track to be pleasant all around. Then skipping ahead to track 5, this is probably my favorite track on the album, Sigh. This is a very stripped back, slow, and soft song with a focus on piano rather than acoustic guitar. And they brought in a guest musician to play flute on this song. And this is the only guest musician on the whole album, aside from drummers. And they use him really well. It was a really great decision to bring in a guest flute player on this thing. Because the flute is just beautiful on this track, and I can't imagine this track without it. The piano has a very dark, somewhat muffled sound to it, and Miwako's vocals are soft and almost whispery, but still very direct and very emotive. And the flute solo that appears in the midpoint of this album is just beautiful. There's also a little bit of brass, I assume more kind of muted trumpet or something, in the background that kind of plays second fiddle to the flute. And it all just works really well into a really nice, cohesive track that has really well-defined parts and just all throughout really beautiful melodies and harmonies. It's really like 10 out of 10 track. I really like this thing. And from there on, there's something unique and there's something interesting to talk about with all of these tracks. And I really like really all of the tracks that appear on here. But for time's sake, I'm going to cut it down to one more. I'm going to talk about the second to last track, Kinds of Not. Kinds of Not is my least favorite track on here. But not because it's a bad song, but more because it just doesn't fit the album. It comes right after Autumn Moon, which is a very soft, somber song. And then it kicks off with this big, like, hey, we're going to have a good time, kind of upbeat drum fill. And gets like really just colorful and happy. And the drum part's really busy. And I like the song. But it just is so kind of jostling from the kind of soft, understated, stripped back atmosphere that had been built up by all of the tracks prior to it, that it really kind of takes me out of the album when this song kicks up with a ba-da-da-da-doo, psh, blah-da-da-da. Like, it's kind of absurd how kind of polar opposite it is from the track that precedes it. And after it, it just goes right back into the final track, Hope and Peace, which is another kind of soft, somewhat somber, understated track. And this song maybe could have worked like as track 4 after Universal Mind, which was another kind of bigger, more full track. But I mean, I feel like it really would have worked better if this track was just cut from the album. It just doesn't fit what else is going on here. They would have had to add other like happier, more upbeat tracks. So this song wasn't just alone in its happiness. If it had some other tracks kind of sprinkled throughout that it could kind of tie itself to, maybe it could have worked more. But it's just so kind of jostling, and I feel like so surprised every time I'm listening to this album and I'm finishing Autumn Moon and then this song starts up. But despite that one flaw, and despite the slight reservations I have about some of the songwriting on here, I'm feeling an 8 out of 10. I was really surprised with how good this album was. When I finally sat down and listened to it and read through the lyrics. And the lyrics are really good as well. I like a lot of the wordplay she uses. So pick this thing up if you are into singer-songwriter stuff, if you are into like indie folk, if you are looking for a soft, kind of somber, intimate record this definitely has what you're looking for. And I am looking forward to whatever Predawn does in the future. Hopefully, it's only up from here. But that's me. New Predawn album, Absence. I like it a lot. Check it out. Peace.